And believe me, you and everybody else. I mean, the problem is intimidating as hell. And if we have a social environment that expects us to succeed and we are not succeeding, then we are feeling the pressure of the ego trap. And we're feeling the need to actually seek a reason why it is that we're failing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Beat Your Genes podcast. This is episode number 336, and this is a fun episode. We've filled with a little bit of political humor in the beginning. We go over a bit about the 10 paid dates again, just left over from last show. We have a question from a listener about staying a virgin till marriage. And then we end with a heartfelt question from a listener about whether she should go through with a marriage that she's not that excited about. The timestamps are below if you want to skip through the different topics. As always, you can send in your questions or comments through our website or just email me directly. Let's jump inside, see what Dr. Lisle has to say. Dr. Lisle, how you doing today?
Good, good. All is well.
Yep.
It's a good decision for people just generally, in case they hadn't kind of come to the party before on this. But just for many reasons, it looks like it's probably a good idea to not run for president. You know.
But if you do, make erratic head movements when you're making speeches.
It's pretty amazing. The fascinating story in human history, which will probably be kind of forgotten because it wasn't successful. I mean, we remember Martin Luther King and JFK and Bobby Kennedy. We remember those. We barely remember Reagan's, assassination. We barely ever remember the fact that Gerald Ford, barely missed a bullet, apparently. So and there's a book on my shelf here called King of the Mountain, and it's the story of politics, and it's the story of how rough and tumble it actually is. We see the guy that wrote it, Arthur Ludwig, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Kentucky, just an incredibly entertaining and ingenious book. But Ludwig, on the cover of that book, I don't want to search around in my thing and find it now, but on the cover,
I'll put a picture of it.
It has a chimpanzee with a crown on its head. Okay, so it's really the evolutionary process of political maneuvering in humans, and basically he talks about how in Western democracies, the political process that you see we consider normal, but that is not actually the normal process. The normal process is basically baboons getting together in teams and hitting each other over the head and killing each other and then taking power. That's actually what's going on in the vast majority of countries on the globe. And we don't, and he goes through that. In other words, these aren't hyperbole statements. And he goes through there and he shows that that's actually what it is. And so you see how brutal it all actually is and how it's extremely dangerous because a high number of these people wind up being killed. And so it's just that he says that, it hasn't happened that often in American politics. But when you look at it, we've had, 46 presidents? You've had McKinley was shot, Theodore Roosevelt was shot, Kennedy was shot, Reagan was shot, and now a former president was shot at, and Gerald Ford was shot at. So they did, basically one bullet gets there in McKinley. Oh, Lincoln. God, how am I forgetting Lincoln? Lincoln, McKinley, Roosevelt, Reagan, Ford was shot at, and Kennedy. And then Bobby Kennedy, who was seriously in line for the presidency, had a real shot at it.
Someone threw a shoe at George Bush, I remember.
And then Trump. That's a massive percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they come along rarely, it's like the Olympic Games, so it doesn't happen very often. But when you look at the actual percentage numbers,
15%,
of people that have been successfully shot, a bullet got into them. So that's Lincoln, McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, Kennedy, and Reagan, and Trump. 6 bullets, 6 guys out of 47 have been hit by, out of 46 have been hit by a bullet. That i.e. Dr. Ludwig would say, I proved my case. Like even in Western democracies, we have it is an extremely dangerous process to be involved in. So what the hell, so that life goes on. But in case you were thinking about a career in politics, just take heed that that was not a bizarre event. That's actually an event that occurs with astonishing regularity if we look at the pages of history.
Yeah.
Yeah. And why would we expect that to be true? Because there are resources that are under conflict. So you're gonna find out that animals all over nature have conflicts of interest, particularly with members of their own species, because they are after the same values out of the environment. So we don't have a lot of conflicts with hyenas, but we have conflicts with other people. And so hyenas don't kill very many people, but people kill a lot of people and always have. And that's because of conflicts over resources. So political processes are a rough and tumble place where there is substantial conflict, i.e., over the resources. So no surprise that we get some serious violence around that. In fact, the entire map of the globe, we call it a political map because that's where the lines are drawn. And if you come over here, we're going to shoot you, for God's sakes. You're on that team, we're on this team. And the political divisions were won out of warfare. I mean, those are the lines that you see typically. Sometimes negotiation, but generally speaking, when you see a little line around a country, you know what I mean? There was bloodshed that wound up defining that line. So, oh well, that's just a little interesting walk through a little bit of human history. All right.
Yeah.
Do we got any questions?
Yeah, we got some questions. We got a lot of comments about the last show about the 10 paid dates rule.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting to see the different comments. People, a lot of the our listeners really appreciated your take on this, and these rules, they're not really rules to follow. It's more just the logic of what you're actually looking for. So
Yes.
like you said, whether it's 10, whether it's 8, whether it's 100, whatever it is, you're watching for evidence from the male's perspective, how he's reacting. So I wanted to read one of the comments from the person who didn't agree with you, just real quickly. And the comment was, and I'm going to blur out their name from the comment because I don't. It's not a personal attack. It's more just to discuss the logic of it. So the comment is, I couldn't imagine any self-respecting man doing 10 paid dates without some sex happening. That's insane to me. To which I'm thinking, I can't imagine a man respecting themselves if they blew it on the potential woman of their life by pushing for sex too quickly. Like I can't imagine the guy who does that isn't sitting there in bed every night saying, gosh, what did I say to scare her off? What did I do to scare her off? What happened? And then never forgiving himself if that opportunity only comes once or twice or a couple times in your life. You don't want to screw it up at all.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. That person either has not found an extraordinary woman to be his life partner, or if he did, he got away with it and it was fine. You know what I'm saying? So he happened to be sending reasonably believable cues, or for whatever reason, it was a reasonable thing for her to proceed, and it turned out that it worked out. But you're absolutely right. In other words, it's just a CB that's going on inside of heads. And I would have to agree with you that put in front of somebody that you feel like is at the upper reach of your ability to qualify and that you feel like is a stellar bargain. I mean, the last thing you're going to do is be clumsy. And clumsy, pushy, short term. It's like, no, you would, the smartest move on the chessboard from the standpoint of any long-term optimization program would be wait until the signals coming from them are extremely strong. Okay. That would be, if that's on date 3 because the girl's not going to take no for an answer, oh, well.
Sometimes life is difficult, Okay.
But the whole point is that the idea that a self-respecting male would not be patient with a stellar female is absurd. he will be patient, and if this guy wouldn't, then that's okay. I mean, a lot of people, the way their little chips would be set would be such that they would have a reduced likelihood of ever finding a spectacular mate and a higher chance of having a lot of casual mating strategy pregnancies. In other words, it's a different mating strategy. There's going to be variation in males, considerable variation as to how it is that they're built. So if he happens to have a high predilection for casual mating strategy, he would not actually understand what he's missing. Okay, it's like somebody that's never heard Mozart. It's like, what the hell do we need Mozart for? You know, the famous phrase from Henry Ford is, history is more or less bunk. It's like, okay, okay, well, there's some shit that's happened in the last 6,000 years that's unbelievably interesting and incredibly instructive. That if you're Henry Ford and you're extremely successful and you're sitting in Detroit in 1938 and you're like, I own the freaking world. What do I need to know anything about history? It's like, okay, that's fine, but there's some important, interesting experiences and knowledge that you're missing, and that would be you may not know it and you may never care, but the truth is it's still there, and that is the truth about the extraordinary potential depth of commitment and partnership and empathy and shared life experience that can go on with a monogamous pair bond that is stellar. In other words, there's nothing like it. Okay, there's nothing like it. There is nothing as good as that. And the notion that if a female is holding you off because she's a high fidelity female who is being very careful with her DNA and she's slowly vetting you over the period of 6 weeks, and you're going to be too freaking impatient and you're too self-respecting to put up with it, such is life. You don't know how to mine for gold. You know how to mine for copper. That's okay.
I love that example.
Yeah.
I also thought one little thing too is that perhaps the males who feel this way have not yet been around enough females to know what their upper reach is. So they may lack experience. You know, if you're, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my best example was Larry, who was pretty fast and loose until he ran into Cheryl. And the moment he ran into Cheryl, he was instantaneously totally patient. So that self-respecting male had so many notches on his belt, there wasn't anything left of the belt. So anyway, that's that. All right, that's all good, Nathan. What else we got?
All right, so our first question, let me pull it up here. Our first question, we got a number of questions about, you know, marriage and dates, and so we're going to go over a couple of them here. Dear Dr. Lisle, I'm a 32-year-old female, Catholic, and I want to wait until marriage to have sex. Not 10 paid dates, but marriage. However, it seems that nowadays no one is willing to wait. All the religious men that I know that are my age are already married, or even they didn't wait. I don't know what to do. I'm still a virgin, even at my age, and I don't want to give up my values just because men are used to living in an over-sexualized world and want instant gratification. How do I approach this problem?
This is an interesting problem. So let's talk through why this is complicated. And when we're trying to, you have to understand not only there are conflicts between people and between animals for resources, there's also always conflict within the person themselves about where they should be spending their time and energy in pursuit of what resources. So this person who obviously is very sexually conservative by nature, and conservative generally probably by nature, in other words, not super high open to experience, this is who they are. And so they can be a little bit confused, and we can be in trouble from, for example, being concerned about a track record that looks like this. And if the world knew the track record, what would they would think, and what status would they confer upon you for having such a pristine record? That's a little bit of a problem. Okay, that kind of record might be shiny in some extraordinary sense, but it's actually bizarre and would never fly in a Stone Age environment. And it's not of any significance in the natural history of the species. And undoubtedly, people are paying attention to when a woman loses her virginity among the Bushmen of the Kalahari. But there's no 32-year-old Bushwoman of the Kalahari who has been living in and around the carnal circumstances of our natural history and is a virgin at 32, unless she's utterly disinterested in sex. There is no such thing as marriage on the Kalahari. Okay, is casual mating strategy versus pair bond strategy psychology naturally emerges in the dynamics between two people. That is true. So if you're a very conservative female, you may have an extremely low, in fact, basically a zero interest in casual mating strategy. That the only situation that you would find where you would be happy and excited about pursuing sexuality would be under pair bond circumstances. There's quite a few people like that. Okay, so that's not a super unusual characteristic of females. It's not actually even completely outlandish with respect to males. It's rarer in males, but it's not a bizarre psychology for females to have. When I say it's not bizarre, I don't know, 6 in 100. You know what I'm saying? In other words, we're not way out in the tail of some bell curve that's freaky. We're like, and there's a lot of women this attitude of, I just want to, God, if I could just finally meet the right guy, then I'm done. I'll never have sex with anybody else. That is an extremely common psychology of females. Okay. And some of the women that are listening, they're like, yeah, what's the problem? Don't you guys feel that way? And it's like, well, not exactly. Okay. So i.e., now, and there's women that have obviously very high openness and very high sexual variety motivation. That's also not super uncommon, but I think it's as common for having a high drive for variety as it is to have a drive for extraordinary fastidiousness and care about sexual experience at all in females. I think those are probably equal. And the bell curve puts the medium in the middle, which makes the female pretty conservative but reasonably open, i.e., that's your standard human female. Trying to knock out bamboozled by casual mating strategy. And I believe that when women are, quote, open for casual mating strategy, a significant component of that is actually a true life situation where they're not really open to casual mating strategy. They are attempting to snag a fancy male. Okay, they don't know that that's what they're doing. They're just acting like, hey, he seems like he's interested and he's cute. And I don't mind having some fun in the sun. I'm not looking for anything serious. Yeah, like hell you're not. Okay, let's just have you date this guy for about a week and a half, and then we're going to find out how you feel. And the truth of the matter is that it's not uncommon for them to suddenly realize that they're more into it and it ought to be more serious. And how come he's not taking her more seriously? It's like, yeah, I've seen that happen a bunch of times. Okay, so however, there are certainly conditions under which women are interested in casual mating, and they are fine with casual mating being casual mating. Not denying that that's true. Not super typical of the species. So this woman who is saying, I don't want to do anything till I'm married. It's like, we should examine why those words are coming up out of your adaptive unconscious and being translated in English to share that concept with me. And that is, are we sure that we're using the correct words in identifying the concept? Because it is bizarre that there would be any value in, quote, waiting till we're married. The value the legitimate value that's in this concept is I want to be very confident that this is a highly committed long-term pair bond male. That's what makes sense from the standpoint of the evolution of the species. I'm going to wait till I'm married says, I want public acknowledgement and praise for having been this oddball. Okay. And I want the guy to have to guarantee in front of God and country and family that he's done, that he's searched for me and I'm one and done and that's it. And this is a sort of a very special, rare record for our species to have lived so pristinely. You know, believe me, when Prince Rainier married whatever her name was, that fancy blonde Grace Kelly, okay? She wasn't a freaking virgin. He's Prince Rupert, for God's sakes, okay? So he could have gotten the equivalent looking person that was a virgin, but he wasn't interested. In other words, there's no great prize on the part of the male for the female to be a virgin. There is, you know, some men that would consider that a significant prize, but not very many. And that's because that's not characteristic of the most mating opportunities that you're going to see on the Kalahari. Most of the mating opportunities in a man's life on the Kalahari are not going to be with a female who is a virgin. So it's not particularly a very significant value. So what significant value is it? I'm not exactly sure. And that, the logic that's sitting under there is a logic to it. In other words, it would be curious for her to explain to me or to somebody else, what exactly is the value that you're seeking? Okay. So I'm going to now float another possibility, and it could be partially true. It could be absolutely not true at all. Might not have anything to do with it. But sometimes when people are having difficulty finding people that would qualify for them, one of the things that they will do is they will institute a self-handicapping strategy that effectively protects them from the evidence from the social world that they're failing in a competitive pursuit, because it's effectively an engineered, a way to engineer around the consequences of effectively competitive struggle. This is a version of the ego trap. So you will see people put standards impossibly high. Okay, I couldn't date anybody unless they're an X, i.e., vegetarian, vegan, Republican, libertarian, you know,
Listen to the Be Your
Hindu.
Genes podcast.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, we set the bar very high, making it very difficult for you to succeed. And we effectively hide behind that as a reason why it is that we're having difficulty in that domain. I won't work for a corporation that, you know, does this or that. Oh, okay. So you're unemployed. You've been unemployed for 27 months now, and you're living in your mom's basement, but you just can't get yourself to work for X because it's all impossible. Well, maybe that's because you've tried to work for X and X wasn't willing to hire you. Okay. This is a when it gets onto the moral high planes about various sundry things, this tends to be it's an enlightenment trap. It's a process by which we are attempting or succeeding in deluding ourselves or others that we are above it all. Okay, so this question, I do not mean to be insulting to the questioner. I'm not saying that this is actually involved in her motivation at all. Her motivation is somewhat mysterious to me. Okay, but there is a distinct possibility, and that's all it is. It's just a possibility that this is the reason why she's feeling this motivation is that, in fact, she has stuck her toe in the water a little bit and found out that the water's pretty freaking cold out there when it comes to mating competition. It's not easy to succeed. And so as a result of that, if it would be expected that she should succeed, by her social environment, then the social, i.e., her mother or her father, and you're such a good girl and you're pretty and you've got a lot going for you. How come you can't find Mr. Right? Okay. And you can sniff that you're in trouble. And if you're sexually conservative anyway, then it's not a very far reach to actually put this up as a barrier and then basically turn to the world and say, the world is unreasonable. You know what I mean? This is what I'm seeking. This seems reasonable. Isn't this reasonable? It sure seems like it's been historically reasonable. And, so therefore it must have some reason behind it. Okay. And if that's true, then I just can't accept anything else. And what am I to do? Okay. You can see how convenient that is at basically saying, I'm kind of above it all. That's why I'm having trouble with this domain. I'm above it all because my standards are so high. Okay. And they're sort of moralish standards. Okay. So, and I have them so high for myself, and I would have them so high for a partner, etc. It's like, okay. So let's be careful that we don't actually have a being that is intimidated by the competitive problem, that is in fact, and believe me, you and everybody else, I mean, the problem is intimidating as hell. And if we have a social environment that expects us to succeed and we are not succeeding, then we are feeling the pressure of the ego trap, and we're feeling the need to actually seek a reason why it is that we're failing. One of those reasons is, I'm just going through a lot and I'm not trying. Yeah, okay, that's one. Another is, I'm too pure, I'm too good. I always have to tell the truth, and so therefore that's going to make sure that I don't succeed in so many domains because that's just who it is that I am. Okay, or I'm going to be a virgin my whole life unless I meet somebody that completely accepts that and is willing to court me for months to do a legitimate assay of whether or not this relationship is solid before we would ever have sex. It's like, okay, that bar is vastly above the bar on the Kalahari. Okay, we know what this looks like. Okay, we know that by the time people are really excited about each other, that they basically have analyzed that the other is a spectacular looking deal. What happens is they talk incessantly. Okay, they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk. And apparently about 1 million words have been spoken between them by the time any child is conceived. So this is really interesting. This is the process. It's the process of 1 million words. And to say, nope, I'm going to put it out there at 15 million words. It's like, okay, well, that is a little bizarre. And that didn't happen in human natural history. And there were women that went to their graves without ever having been mated. Not very many, but they did for various and sundry reasons. One of them could be odd, basically oddities with respect to their own sexuality. Like that's just who it is that they were. They very significant percentage of people have basically no libido at all and virtually no interest. Or they've got something in there, but they're so inherently fussy that nobody that ever comes along that would ever show interest in them would ever activate any interest in them. So in other words, they're just basically by design, they're pretty well going to be a non-player. Okay. That's not typical of the species, but there's outliers where that's going to be true. It has to be. It's just a bell curve of the way that all these things function. There's, not to mention, different variances in sexuality generally. You've got homosexual, bisexual, whatever else it is that we want to call the variants that we are discovering. The point of it all is that you could, but mostly if we have a normal sexual heterosexual psychology, that individual, if they have normalish looking libido and they have sufficiently sexually attractive opportunity, forget whether or not they line up to some resume and checklists that we've got in the modern environment, like what's your 401k and where did you go to school. Forget about that. We're talking about the Stone Age level analysis of looks, brains, and personality. Okay. If a person, you should be self-calibrated to the point where somebody sometime is going to be interested in you that is somewhere in range. Okay. If you're a 3, they're a 4, looks like they're kind of interested, that should hype up some degree of interest. Okay. You're a 7, they're an 8, or etc. In other words, these kinds of dynamics, you're likely to wind up at some point in this lifetime with something that starts to fire up a feeling of opportunity. Okay. I can absolutely see someone that's highly conservative, has exceptionally high standards in a lot of ways, and doesn't necessarily have a wide amount of made choice. So it doesn't happen very often. They're also in social psychological circumstances that are not conducive to being hit on. They're living in a modern nation state with boundaries everywhere. They're not in interdependent villages. The men don't know your name. There aren't 50 men that know your name by the time you're 14 years old in the neighboring villages, and that they're all taking an eye on you, and the ones that are interested are making damn sure you know it. You don't live in those circumstances. So as a result of that, you may actually be in circumstances that are in poverty with respect to opportunity. And time can pass, and a lot of time can pass. And it can pass so much that you can start to feel like you are not particularly attractive and your odds are not good. Okay. At that point, a lot of things can happen. We can feel depressed and demoralized and unmotivated. And we can also potentially feel the specter of the ego trap. Okay. And now the ego trap puts us in a position where we translate it into this, enlightenment thing where, no, I believe that the right thing to do is that you should get married before anything happens. It's like, well, that is a ludicrous comment. Okay. Buried under there are some deeply false assumptions about what's in the best interest of human beings. Okay. It is, in fact, in your interests to vet somebody very carefully, particularly if they're female and you're conservative, naturally. Of course, you should vet them carefully. But the notion that you should have as a standard and have as an announced standard that there's going to be no sexuality until we're married, I think that is a self-destructive, it's either an error in judgment, which is why we're exploring it, or it's an ego trap manufactured, fiasco. So to whoever wrote this and anybody else who knows anybody else that's, near a problem like this, and I've seen this problem before, okay, this is a super interesting dilemma. And, and quite frankly, I reserve the right to be wrong in the sense that you could be such a hyper conservative organism that it just, that doesn't feel right. But that doesn't make sense to me that marriage would be the bar. The bar would be the vetting and the commitment of the organism. And the vetting and the commitment of the organism shouldn't last for 6 months. That's actually not how this species works. Okay, so and unless you're somebody that say, oh yeah, and then if you're Mr. Right, then we could go marry down at the courthouse, at the end of date 18. It's like, okay, that makes some sense to me. But this, I feel like a bizarre modern concept has been imported and is parking itself on top of the motivational system, and there's something a little haywire in that concept. Okay.
That's
all right.
great, Dr. Lisle.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've seen this in social circles, a lot of different angles, but one of the angles is parents pushing this idea as a display of this is how valuable our eggs are. So we're gonna impose such high costs to get to those eggs as a display, and the marketplace.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one avenue.
Yes, and then then the individual, if they're super high conscientiousness and reasonably agreeable,
Hmm.
they're going to go along with the parents' prescriptions, and there could be resources that are critically involved there. In other words, the whole thing is a great big mess.
Hmm.
And absolutely, without a doubt, without mentioning that, we would have been remiss. Okay. Yeah, Jen wouldn't have missed it. She would have been all over it. Patriarchy. Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. It's taking place in a wider context there, and so, but yeah, hopefully we've done something to shed a little bit of light on some thinking here that our questioner might find useful to think about.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr.
Okay.
Lisle. So our next question is a similar question about marriage, though. But dear Dr. Lisle, I'm a 45-year-old female, and I'm about to get married for the first time, but I'm having second thoughts.
Mhm.
A few years ago, I met a man, and he is now my fiance, and we live together. He's very nice, he's smart, he has a good personality, and is fairly attractive, but I never quite had intense, passionate feelings for him. I never got those butterflies I would get whenever I had a crush in the past. I should also note that I've never been in a relationship because I never really felt ready. I've always been busy with other things, and therefore I feel like I wasted my 20s and 30s from a dating standpoint. My fiance and I get along very well, but a lot of the time it feels more like a comfortable friendship. I would love to have a passionate and meaningful friendship. I would love to have a passionate and meaningful relationship, but I feel that at my age, the good and attractive men have all been taken a long time ago. If I let him go, the older I get, the harder it will be to find someone. However, it also feels that by marrying him, I'm doing both of us a disservice. I also don't want to be single at this point in my life. So should I go ahead and marry him even if I'm not in love with him?
Wow. Um, we would have to talk about the person's entire context. And in other words, we need to know about the person's. We hear the absolute universal frustration of the competitive problem. Okay, so the person is basically saying, no, I can't do good enough. My perceived probability of success about marketing myself tells me that I'm not, that the good guys don't exist because they've all been taken. That's bullshit. Los Angeles has got 25 million people in it, for God's sakes. Okay, so there are vast quantities of people in the world, and there are 90 million single people in the United States alone. That means there's 45 million single men, and in an age range within 10% of you, 10 or 15% of the population, that means there's like 5 million men out there, or 7 million, maybe 10 million people. Okay, single. All right, now, believe me, being one of those people, trust me, there's something wrong with it. Maybe more than one thing wrong with it. But the point of it all is that you're designed by nature with essentially an averaging or gestalt apparatus that takes in who that person is from all dimensions, including the smell under their armpits to whether they got fungus under their toenails. I do not have fungus under my toenails. The point is that strangely enough, both my parents did. I don't know. I always sort of expected that's just what happened to your toenails when you got old. But so far I'm skating on that.
Maybe that's why they were compatible. So.
Maybe they rubbed toes at night and they transferred it. I don't know, whatever. But
that's real love.
at any rate, but the point is that this is, if we were to translate this, and we can understand the questioner, it's a very good question. It's a heart-wrenching question about human life. And I think that basically we would say, okay, let's suppose that we were to live for 200 years. And there was, the last 10% of the last 20 years kind of winding down, and you're basically not leaving the old farm in Kentucky. You've seen France, you're done. Okay. All right. but you got 180 years. Now, at 45 years old, would we settle like this? And the answer is, are you out of your frickin' mind? You're still totally in the game at 160. Like, why would we ever do that? And the answer is we would never do it. That would be an insane trade. Okay. So what's happening is we're finding out the person is struggling behind what? The conflict inside their nervous system over the expenditure of their time and energy in as they're attempting to figure out which resources they should be trying to acquire and which resources that they should not. This is the nature of the conflict. And these are seemingly impossible looking conflicts, because how could we ever add up, you know what I mean, on a spreadsheet what all the debits and credits are? And the answer is you can't. Your brain does that over time as it runs an extraordinarily complicated cost-benefit analysis. And what comes out of it is a feeling. Okay. And so your feelings are the translation of the gambling machine's analysis of what this trade looks like. And your gambling machine is saying, boy, pretty problematic trade. Okay. So you're flat, and it's always going to feel flat to you. If he's into you and he'd be excited about you and he wants to marry you because you qualify and he really doesn't qualify, then you can also feel the responsibility of agreeing to it, that he really has a false victory. It's like giving your kid a gold medal when they finish third. It's like, yeah, that's kind of there's no pride in that, and there's no satisfaction of achievement of that. It's not real. You know, we can give them a gold medal, but they didn't earn it. Okay. So all I can tell you is that your nervous system is designed by nature to optimize until your last breath. It's optimizing a process of attempting to acquire resources, whether that's, you know, a warm muffin, or whether or not it's socks to put on your feet at night in the cold, or whether or not it's a tan to look cool, like you've been out in the sun, like you're one of the cool people, or whether or not it's getting up on a surfboard. Whatever it is that you're doing, it's a series of experiences that will result in a feeling output that has both quantitative and qualitative variation. So the quantitative variation is the intensity of the feeling. The qualitative variation is on a continuum of really blissful positive versus incredibly negative. It's the difference between tasting really good watermelon and being stung, you know, by a scorpion. In other words, that's qualitatively terrible, and this is qualitatively excellent. And then there's an intensity to it, et cetera. And so there's a continuum of feeling and its intensity. The little aspects of this relationship, there will be a moment when, well, if he works hard, he's a good guy, and he saves some of his money, and he's solid, and he's got good insurance, and you're kind of an artist that likes to paint, and you'd like to quit your job, maybe go to half-time, then you can feel like, well, in that case, I'll get to have those hours when I'm painting in the little art studio, and that will feel good. But at the same time, that means that, you know, when the lights go out, it's like, oh, this is going to be a little uncomfortable and a little bit sad and rejecting and et cetera, whatever the hell this thing looks like. So the Nathaniel Branden was, you know, one of the more impassioned writers and thinkers about romantic love. He didn't understand many things about it in the way that David Buss would come along later, and David Buss would understand a tremendous amount looking through the lens of evolution. But Branden was an influence on me early in my life, and I always had a lot of respect for him. I felt like he was, you know, psychodynamically twinged, but, you know, he came out of that part of our history in the country, and he wouldn't have been exposed to what I was exposed to. But he had, in his gut, he had some pretty damn good instincts. about this. He was an inherently very honest soul who tried to be honest with himself and tried to be honest with his patients. And one of the things he said was probably in a book called The Psychology of Romantic Love, was that he said, romantic love is not for cowards. You've got to be courageous about this. And it's not for everybody. It is a theoretical potential that sits inside of everybody. But so is maximizing your potential at ice skating. That's a theoretical potential in everybody, but not everybody's motivated to go to the process of doing that. I'm not. Okay. I'm somewhat motivated, not with ice skating, but I'm somewhat motivated with basketball. Okay. There have been times when I was very motivated with golf. There's potentials that sit inside of you that can be actualized with effort. Okay. And if you do that, you foreclose other things that would be actualized. You can't help it. You can't optimize your ability to do golf and basketball in the same lifetime. It can't be done. You take the time away from one, you're taking it away from the other. I mean, that's just how it works. If you settle for security in a relationship like this, you foreclose your ability to find a more intensive romantic passion for yourself and for your partner. In other words, that forecloses it for them too, unless one day when they are feeling, abandoned and not reciprocated, and then they go online and they secretly meet somebody, and then it all fires up and the whole thing goes to, blows up just the way it should. Okay. So all I can tell you is that I understand the dilemma. It's a dilemma that I myself was in. I was in that dilemma from age 23 to 36. For 13 years, I sat in that dilemma. And it required the evolution of desire and some people close to me that were extremely honest with me about what their lives looked like for me to find out that my intuition that there was a lot more that was possible was true. It was also going to be the case that it probably wasn't going to be easy or simple, okay? Which has also turned out to be true. So, but that doesn't mean that it's not real. And when I meet people that are in excellent circumstances, they know how to communicate that, and they are being honest, and it's true. Okay. So, what does this all mean? Well, if you're 45 years old and they just gave you a little bit of a raise to the shift supervisor, and a few more dollars an hour at a job you never wanted, and that you feel like you got significantly more potential in, the question is, do you take it? It's like, particularly if they say, well, it's a 10-year contract. I mean, and then it rolls over 10 years after that. So it's pretty much your career. It's like, wow, am I going to do that? Well, this all has to do with how adventurous people are, how much courage they have, et cetera, et cetera. There isn't a right answer. I can tell you that the feedback that your nervous system is giving you right now is going to be very similar to the feedback that you're going to be getting indefinitely. Okay. So it's like, okay, life isn't bad. It's got some good aspects to it. It's not very good here. So it's slightly disturbing that we got this sort of significant conflict that sits inside of the relationship, because my nervous system would absolutely like to be a hell of a lot more excited. And I'm going to want to avoid physical intimacy, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, that's all true, but I have this, and that. And so how do I feel about the whole thing? Kind of mediocre. Okay. Well, as Nathaniel Branden would say, romantic love is not for cowards. It's actually not going to be very often for people who aren't willing to take some chances and willing to lose. So for me, I would rather, I have a phrase, 0 is a pretty good score. In other words, I would rather be in no relationship at all than to be in a relationship that was like that. Okay. In other words, that feels like a pretty high price to me. But that's me. Okay. And I have my own unique motivational system and my own desire for the psychological and physical intimacy that is actually fairly prototypical for the species. But that doesn't mean, we all sit a different place on that. I'm in general somebody that is willing to take risks, okay, more than most people. So I have, I'm not that open with respect to a lot of stuff. I've never smoked any pot or done anything, thought about a tattoo. In other words, I'm inherently pretty conservative in a lot of ways, but I'm highly risk tolerant in a lot of other ways. If I wasn't, I would be an insurance defense attorney. Okay. I never would have to worry about my private practice or whether it was going to work or any bullshit like that. No, I would have used this brain to just do the organization, read the contracts, give the client the feedback, get the bill paid. That's it. That would be the strategy. That's not the strategy. Okay. That doesn't make me better. It makes me different. Okay. A lot of people out there face this dilemma. And I can't tell this person what to do or anybody else. But I can tell you that for what you are feeling now is going to be extremely consistent with what you will feel indefinitely into the future. That seems to me personally to be an exorbitantly high price for some friendship and company. Okay, so that is my perception, but those risk reward ratios are seen through my eyes. I never would have taken the risks that I've seen other people take in business or in life. I'd never bungee jumped. Okay. I would never snort cocaine. There's risks that other people do routinely that I wouldn't come anywhere near. I'd never let somebody put an ink needle in my arm so I could have a tiger on my bicep. Okay. These are things that people do and they get away with them all the time and they just do it. Okay. So I am no intrepid warrior or life experience, but this is one where I wouldn't take, a bronze medal and I wouldn't settle for silver. Okay. My attitude would be, I'm either winning it or I'm not having it at all. And that's where I weigh in.
That's amazing. Right. Well, thank you. Yeah. We wish this listener best of luck with her decision. And,
right.
And then.
Yeah. I also would tell her one other thing. Mm-hmm. And that is, if you're not sure and you're getting cold feet, just put it off a year. That's the smart move. Don't make a big one when you can make a small one. The big one now gets stickier. You're more basically wired in, but with a bunch of baling wire into this thing. Don't do it. Okay. If you're feeling this way, just sit right where you are. Well, it's been so long. We've been together 7 years. So it's a difference. Well, we've already announced it, set out the invitations. Kill it. Okay. In other words, don't dig yourself any deeper. If you're not certain, then I would just say sit on it. Or if you can imagine that if it's not problematic, you could look at it and say, fine, if I can't stand it, I'll just get a divorce 3 years from now. The hell with it. But I wouldn't do that. In other words, if I was feeling this mediocre, I just wouldn't do it. What's the point? This gets to some ancillary CVs that are being run: financial security, health insurance, guy's got a good job, nice house, nice neighborhood. Like, I don't know what the hell the entire CV is about. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I can't speak. For all I know, that person has chronic fatigue syndrome, barely makes ends meet, doesn't have any family money, you know what I mean? And is getting by on Social Security, disability, and a little part-time job. And this guy makes her life a hell of a lot better. Okay. In other words, we don't know what the whole CV looks like. Mm-hmm. Okay. But with the data that I have, all things being equal, my attitude would be, what's the rush? Okay. Sometime in the next year, you may find the courage to say, I can't do this. Okay. And hopefully you don't need to do it for some other important needs. So anyway.
Yeah. And if you're feeling this way, and it's very possible he may be picking up on that as well. And so if you, yeah. And if you say, hey, let's delay it for a year, he may, be willing to have a conversation, and then it may be that the solution might become even more clear after that when both of you decide. rather than, don't do him any favors about staying in there because you think that he's going to be happier with you there if you're not
Right.
interested in it.
Yeah, all these things. Marriage is a strange invention of humans, and it's not consistent with human natural history. So we're doing something unnatural to basically, essentially have a bunch of legal contracts and which are legitimate for important reasons in the modern world where you have wealth and children, et cetera. So it's understandable why that's in there. But actually, ideally, it's not in there at all. Okay. So so if you don't have to put it in there for some reason, why the hell are we putting it in there? Okay, so there would be other ways to achieve those ends without that. It's like, well, what if he breaks up with me and then I'm 47 and broke and da da da. Okay, well, let's write a little contract that says that he's going to give me $35,000 a year for 5 years after the time that I leave. What about that? In other words, the sounds a little crazy, but better that than to get married, for God's sakes. So anyway, but I would be very, what a thing to do. I've done it. I've been in front of the altar, in front of all the family and friends, and said that this is, that I was committed to life. And it's like, what a sad thing to have had to go through because I felt the social pressure from other people. And it's like, yeah, never should have done it. Never should have happened that way. That's fine. I was young and I learned, an immensely important lesson. So I couldn't be the therapist that I am today had I not gone through that. And so this is such a common dilemma for people. My attitude is get the pressure and get the other factors out of it. Question is, do we very much want to be in very close, intimate space with that other human being indefinitely? Okay. If the answer to that is absolutely, that if you do a thing called marriage, okay, maybe there's some utility in that. But if that's not how you feel, and then I just feel like, whoa, why are we doing this? Let's back this whole thing up and let's check our premises as to whether or not this is in anybody's best interest. Okay. All right. One more quick one. Let's see what we got.
All right. Well, one more quick one here. So, yeah, Dr. Lisle, I have been with the same man for 13 years since I was 19.
Well, this is going to be quick. I could tell. It's going to be real simple.
Yeah.
Your relationship.
We can
give you a decision and nothing flat. Go ahead, Nick.
We can wait till next show. Actually, this one might we may want to hear you wind out.
Yeah, that sounds already complicated and important and have high gravity to it. So
yeah, so we'll go till next.
Maybe we'll wrap it up right here, and then we'll take a deep breath, and we'll be back to the deep water in a couple of weeks.
All right, that sounds good, Dr. Lisle. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to see you, Nathan, and we hope our good friend Jen Hawk's doing fine. I'll be doing a Living Wisdom library with her again soon. She's working hard on kinds of stuff. She's got a new book out, I think. Yeah, I guess it's out. I haven't looked at it yet. At any rate, hope she's doing well. Hope everybody out there is doing good. And don't run for president. It's dangerous. Okay. All right, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Okay.
That's it. Bye.
Bye. That's it for this episode. I really appreciate you watching. Thanks again to everyone in the comment section sharing your thoughts about each episode. If you have questions you'd like me to put in the queue to ask Dr. Lisle, you can send it in through the website or email me directly. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.